USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
My dad was one guy who enlisted and went to war, became a pilot, and did his job, and that was symbolic of so many other Americans. This beautiful cemetery with the wall of the missing, the beautiful chapel, is a place of reflection. To have subsequent generations of people who are looking at their family history and thinking, wow, my great-grandfather is buried here and people still remember him. ABMC is taking care of our ancestor.
When people come to our sites, they're learning why this place is important, why these individual stories are important, why we continue to operate the way that we do.
You lose that first life on the battlefield. That one person could lose their life a second time when we forget them. There's no greater calling and no more worthy assignment than to keep that memory alive.
Mike Conley, Executive Director for Management of the American Battle Monuments Commission. I was born in Minnesota, but my dad moved us to the Central Valley of California when I was about 6, so basically I'm a Californian, consider myself a Californian. Did undergraduate work at San Jose State College, majored in journalism, did a master's at University of Southern California in communication management. When I was at San Jose State, it was during the Vietnam era. And I had a low draft number. And so I said, well, if I'm going to go in, I'm going to go in as an officer. And at San Jose State, they only had Air Force and Army, ROTC. I think if they had had Navy, I might have gone Navy, but they didn't have Navy. So I chose Air Force. And being a journalism major, my dream was to be a reporter on a small town newspaper and someday own that paper and influence what was going on in the community. What I didn't realize was coming into the Air Force as an officer, I would be on the other side of the camera, answering the questions, not asking the questions as a reporter, basically being a spokesperson for my unit. And I was going to do 4 years and get out and go back and pursue my reporting dream. But I ended up loving it. I loved the mission, I loved the lifestyle, I loved the travel, and I got used to the role. And so I ended up spending 25 years in the Air Force. Never thought that that would happen. Was career public affairs officer, stationed in Greece, Alaska, and back and forth from East Coast to West Coast. One of my more interesting assignments was being an Air Force liaison officer to Hollywood for 2 years, working TV productions, being a technical advisor, working on scripts. And that was kind of fascinating. But did my last 5 years in the Pentagon, retired as a colonel, and most of my colleagues thought I was nuts, but I actually enjoyed my time in the building. You know, taking an issue, working it through the air staff, getting the chief of staff to sign off on it, and, you know, that gave me a sense of accomplishment. So I'm proud of my career, very fulfilling, and took about 3 months off, and a colleague, former colleague, who had just come on board at ABMC for the World War II Memorial Project. This is a battle we're still fighting. I'd never heard of ABMC. didn't know what the commission was, didn't even know that they had been authorized to build a World War II memorial. But he asked me what I was doing. I said nothing. He said, would you help me get a public affairs program going? So I said, sure. And I literally was working 3 days a week, paid by the hour. Then that went to 4 days, then it went to 5, then an annual contract. And 7 years after that started, I moved into the federal service, and I've now been here about 27 years. Hard to believe. We're a commemorative agency. Our mission is to commemorate the service, achievements, and sacrifice of the American Armed Forces. Sometimes in the United States, when authorized by public law by Congress. We did the Korean War Veterans Memorial on the Mall. We did the World War II Memorial on the National Mall. But our primary mission is overseas. We have 26 cemeteries, 32 memorials, monuments, and markers. And through those commemorative sites, we honor the sacrifice. We honor those who gave their freedom so that we can do what we do today. You know, you can tell a lot about the heart and soul of a nation by the manner in which it treats and honors its war dead. And there's a poem written by a poet named Archibald MacLeish. He was a World War I veteran, and he went on to become a Librarian of Congress in the U.S. But he wrote a poem called "The Young Dead Soldiers Do Not Speak." And there's a line in that poem that really resonates with this agency. And that line is, "We leave you our deaths, give them their meaning." Our former secretary, former Senator Max Cleland, was so taken by that line that when we did the Vietnam Pavilion at the Honolulu Memorial, he had it inscribed on the wall in the courtyard. And so through our sites, through our commemorative sites, through our remembrance mission, we do this to give those deaths meaning, to ensure that they are remembered, that that sacrifice is not forgotten, that those overseas cemeteries, which are national treasures, remain relevant. 2023 is our centennial year. We were created in 1923. The impetus for the creation of this agency was General of the Army's John Pershing, the commander of the American Expeditionary Forces in World War I. And, you know, we're known for our cemeteries, but we're the American Battle Monuments Commission, and what he was concerned about following the war was the proliferation of units putting little monuments and markers. We were here, this is what we did. He wanted to bring a semblance of order to the national commemoration of what the American forces did in World War I. And so Congress created ABMC in 1923, and the mission that we were given then is the mission we have today, to commemorate the service of the armed forces. And again, we do that through the cemeteries and monuments and memorials that we administer and maintain worldwide. We're located in 17 countries, including the U.S. Well, the first cemetery dedicated was Suresnes American Cemetery, just outside of Paris, in a suburb of Paris, and that was in 1919. General Pershing was the first chairman of the American Battle Monuments Commission. Beginning in 1923, he served in that capacity until his death in 1948.
On Hill 204, overlooking Chateau Thierry and the Marne River, stands this beautiful monument to commemorate the valor and sacrifices of the American soldiers who fought in the region.
It is for me a distinct pleasure to see before me on this former battlefield so many veterans who served here and elsewhere with the American Army in the World War.
General John J. Pershing was a living American hero. He was the equivalent of a 6-star general. There had never been anybody holding rank that high in the American Army.
I extend a warm welcome here today and trust that your visit to France may meet with your highest expectations. I greet you most cordially.
And then he was replaced. The next chairman was General Marshall.
I'm leaving this morning for France to participate in the dedication of the first
war memorial for those that gave their lives in World War II.
We are surrounded here by those who paid the price of our mistakes or misconceptions. They paid the full price, and this must never be forgotten.
For Marshall to come along a generation later, a world war later, with all of his skill and with all of his heart for the soldiers that had been under his authority as Chief of Staff of the Army in the Second World War. That's just amazing to me. General Marshall was very anxious to see a cemetery in the Philippines to cement the post-war relationship between the United States and the Philippines, because it was on the 4th of July, 1946, that the United States granted the Philippines their independence.
So two very notable Americans led this agency through the World War periods. Well, following the wars, there were thousands of temporary cemeteries throughout the battle areas, throughout the countries where the wars were fought. And at the end of the war, the families were given the choice of having their family member repatriated to the U.S. or to be permanently interred in an overseas cemetery. And so the commission worked with the foreign governments to locate and obtain land for those permanent cemeteries. When we talk about markers, we're basically talking about plaques. We have one at the Royal Naval College in Dartmouth. It's an 11th Amphibious Force marker because the Royal Naval College was the headquarters of the 11th Amphibious Force in World War II. And inside the administrative building, there's a plaque on the wall. And we refer to that as a marker. A monument would be a standalone structure that commemorates some specific activity. And a memorial has a little broader mission to it, a little broader messaging. It gets more into the war dead and the losses.
The World War II East Coast Memorial stands at the southern tip of Manhattan, in New York City's vibrant Battery Park. An 18-foot-high bronze eagle stands guard. 8 gray granite pylons bear the names of over 4,600 U.S. servicemen and women who were lost in the western waters of the Atlantic during World War II. Many died in the epic Battle of the Atlantic, the gigantic struggle between the Allies and the Germans to control that ocean. Over 2,500 miles away, The World War II West Coast Memorial stands on high ground in the Presidio of San Francisco, overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge and the Pacific Ocean. The center of the memorial is a sweeping gray granite wall. On the wall are the names of over 400 American servicemen and women missing in action or lost at sea in the American coastal waters off the Pacific during World War II. Beside it, a statue represents liberty. Both the East Coast and West Coast memorials look out over the edge of vast oceans, where so many Americans gave their last full measure of devotion to the nation.
Beginning with the Korean War, it's been national policy to bring all the war dead home. So I don't believe we'll be creating any more military cemeteries overseas. There is still the possibility of creating new monuments. I mean, it was just a few years ago we dedicated a memorial in New Zealand, commemorating the service of Americans in New Zealand during World War II. We dedicated the plaque at Dartmouth, and we also put a monument right down near the dock where the U.S. forces launched, headed for the invasion on D-Day. You know, everybody knows Normandy American Cemetery. It's probably our best known, it's our most visited cemetery. It's got that cachet of D-Day, so it will always be in the national memory. And we put the monument in Dartmouth, so now we have a commemorative element at the launch point and where they landed. There's a lot of thought that goes into where to put a monument, whether to do any new monuments. And our commission, our Board of Commissioners, makes that decision. But we consult with the military historians. The last time we did a major memorial building endeavor, we actually had a meeting in our conference room. All the military historians came in, they looked through their histories, and we tried to pinpoint significant events or campaigns that had not been commemorated that warranted a commemoration overseas. But we don't do it often. We only have 32 around the world. And I think we're probably done with World War II, World War I at this point. I think if we do anything in the future, it would be more for some of our more recent campaigns and battles. And right now our focus is on maintaining, bringing all of our monuments that we currently have up to what we consider ABMC standard, which is like a like new standard. That's, we really take to heart the level of maintenance that goes into these sites and the condition that we want them to remain, because we perceive, well, the level of care, the pristine nature of the site, the meticulous landscaping, and keeping all of the hard surfaces looking in a like new condition, because we believe that's part of honoring that service and sacrifice. If we let these sites degrade in any way, then we are lessening the honor that is paid to those war dead. And that's something that we won't fall back on. We've been doing it for 100 years. We've been keeping that promise to the American people for 100 years that we will honor that sacrifice. And the level, the standard that we maintain in our sites is partly how we define honoring the war dead. Following the world wars, our visitor buildings, you know, when I first went into a visitor building on my first trip overseas in the 90s, you know, they're like postage stamp size little buildings. And when I walked into them, I had the feeling I was walking into a receiving room at a funeral home. But then I started thinking about it, and I said, that makes sense, because following the wars, who were the visitors? The visitors were the moms, the dads, the children, the siblings of the war dead. And they didn't need to be told the story. They didn't need to be educated on what happened and why it happened. They lived it. They suffered it through the loss of their family member. But now we're moving away from the world wars. We're so far away from it. Younger generations don't have that awareness. They don't have that historical perspective. They don't even understand why there would be an American cemetery in France or Belgium or Italy. And so our agency took it upon itself to become an educational agency, if you will. We have been shifting from being an agency of grieving and mourning to one of education. And it's really to maintain the relevance of those sites, but most importantly, it's to ensure that the memory of those individuals honored there is not forgotten and is understood. And so we started building visitor centers. We're going to be opening our 10th in December at Netherlands, a new visitor center with exhibits, films, to provide the historical context of why that cemetery's there, how and why those individuals died, and the values for which they died. But there's an important part of that too. We don't want our visitor centers to be the destination. We want the visitor centers to be the stop where they get the perspective, they get a piece of the history of why it's there, but the destination needs to be the plots. The destination is walking amongst those headstones, looking at a name on a headstone, having a teenager walk in there, look at a headstone, and maybe they've read that story in the visitor center, and they realize that that young man or woman died about their age. And that brings it home. That brings it home on what they did for all of us. We've got partnerships with the National World War II Museum. We just published a centennial book called Time Will Not Dim with the Smithsonian American Art Museum. A lot of people would say, well, what do you have in common with the American Art Museum? Well, what we have is magnificent art and architecture in those cemeteries. And so we have told the story of our history through the art and architecture and the symbolism and what it represents and why it was selected and the prominent architects and artists who created those works of art. We did a centennial film that was really a behind-the-scenes look at the care we take in maintaining and the dedication and commitment of those local national employees who in some cemeteries are in the third generation of working at our cemetery, honoring and remembering. You know, a lot of people wonder, is America respected overseas? Is what America did for the world in World Wars I and II, is it remembered, is it honored, is it respected? I can tell you, it very much is. Most of our visitors, because we're overseas, most of our visitors every year are other than U.S. citizens. When we have those Memorial Day ceremonies at every cemetery, it's the local national, the local populations, the local citizens who come out. I'll give you one anecdotal story that I've never forgotten. When the U.S. went into Iraq, and the French government did not participate in that. Our secretary was visiting one of our cemeteries in France, and the local mayor came up to the secretary and said, "Mr. Secretary, please do not pay any attention to what's being said in Paris. We will never forget what your nation, what these young men and women did for us. And we will always respect that." At Netherlands American Cemetery, every grave, every name on the wall of the missing has been adopted by a local family. And we care for the grave, we take care of the maintenance, but they treat that soldier, that airman, as a member of their family. They visit the grave, they place flowers on the grave, and they pass this down through their children. And so it's heartwarming to know that sacrifice still garners that level of respect. Our challenge, because they're overseas, our challenge and what we are trying to address is to generate that same awareness and respect within our own country. And that's where the education and the outreach becomes so important, to remind Americans of that sacrifice. You know, and we are addressing that. One of the things we just launched on our website is 360-degree photo tours of the cemeteries. And because we recognize, you know, I could sit here and talk to you today and you could say, man, I got to get to Normandy. I've got to get to Musart-Gone. I've got to see that place. It could be 6, 7, 8 years before you have the opportunity to get over there. So what we're trying to do is bring the cemeteries to life on our website, abmc.gov, and to allow people in the United States to experience that site without physically being able to get there. Pershing, you know, he was basically the founder of the agency. And on a couple of our monuments, well, in Saint Mihiel Cemetery, on the sundial, which is the centerpiece of the cemetery, and on the Chateau Thierry monument, he had inscribed a phrase, "Time will not dim the glory of their deeds." And in 1932, or it was 34, in National Geographic, there was an article authored by him about our World War I cemeteries and monuments that had been created. He ended that article by referencing that phrase, and he said, "Our promise to the American people is that time will not dim the glory of their deeds." That remains our vision statement in our strategic plan. That will always be our vision statement. Time will not dim the glory of their deeds.
There's no greater calling and no more worthy assignment than to keep that memory alive.